Hi, everyone. This is That Guy in Hutch, and you're listening to That Podcast in Hutch. Today, I'm really excited because the state fair is coming back after a year off, and with me today is one of my favorite people and probably the world's biggest Kansas State Fair fan and a former coworker of mine, Amy Bickel. Thanks for coming on, Amy.
Hey, I am excited, and as you know, I love to talk about the Kansas State Fair.
I know you do. So we were talking a little bit before we started recording about, we both worked at the Hutch News together and for quite a number of years. And the fair was always a big part of our life. Come probably August, we'd start thinking ahead. Tell people kind of what we did or kind of how you approached that work when we were at the news.
So I probably started thinking about the fair as soon as it ended in September. And it was always depressing because, you know, you're on this high of being at the fair every day and covering it. And then all of a sudden you go there on the Monday after. And it's kind of like the letdown after Christmas with all the wrapping paper and cleanup and I don't know. But anyway, I started thinking about it then. But, you know, by June, July, August, we were in the middle at the Hutchinson News planning what the 10 days of the fair would look like and you know, a guide to what people needed to know, whether it was like where to find the cheap tea, $1 tea, or, you know, what days could they get into the fair for free or get a discount, or where the free ice cream was or water. I mean, we had it down to a science of what everybody could see and do and what was new and what was exciting and new foods. And between Kathy Hanks, Jason, and I, we had a great plan, and we were covering the fair from 7 a.m. till, you know, dark every day.
I think that's a good thing to talk about. I think on the outside, you know, it probably looked like we produced these guides in advance that said, you know, usually at least a week ahead of time, and a lot of times we'd put together a separate publication that would tell people what they needed to do and all the things they needed to look for, what was new food. And then during the fair, every day we had a lot of content coming out of the fair. But you mentioned that you'd work from 7 a.m. till 9 or 10 at night, most days of the fair. A lot of years you didn't take any time off during the fair. And part of that's because you loved it. And part of that's because you just felt such a duty to the community to report on what is arguably the biggest event of the year.
That's right. I mean, we're talking 340,000 people that come to Hutchinson every year. And it is the biggest event in Kansas, the biggest celebration in Kansas. And so I felt, you know, I just loved it. And I didn't want to miss a day of it because there's something new and different every day. And it's not just what you see when you walk down the street, but it's the people that make the fair that make it great and those stories that you can tell. So without doing that, I feel like people didn't realize like what was behind the scenes and what that story was.
Now, speaking of funny stories coming out of the fair, there's one involving you, a very personal story, one year during the fair. Do you want to share that?
So I was, you know, by July of 2011, I was almost 9 months pregnant, and my due date was actually in September. And I just couldn't imagine giving birth and not being at the Kansas State Fair that year. So I planned to be induced in August before the fair started, which gave me a good 7 days to recover and be at the first day of the fair, which included riding a zip line across Lake Talbot, which I don't recommend 7 days after you give birth.
I remember that. We all thought thought there's no way that she's going to be able to do this. I remember ahead of time we thought she thinks that she's going to be able to do this, and you were adamant about it. You're like,
I was extremely adamant, and I told my husband, and he goes along with anything I tell him. So,
yeah, but you were like, I'm going to have this baby, and I'll have 7 days, and I'll be fine, and I'll be back covering the fair. And everyone's like, we were planning internally that you weren't going to really be there. Yeah,
of course I was going to be there.
But then you showed up, and you were there covering the fair like nothing at all had happened.
That's right. John brought little Jordy to the fair and the twins, and we rolled, and but yeah, I mean, other than riding a zip line, which I wouldn't recommend, but Brownback did it, so I thought, I should have to do it too.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you have to hold up with the governor of Kansas at that time. Yeah. So, talking about that and thinking about that, I wanted to sit down with you because, in my view, there are maybe you and one other person I know who know more about the fair than anyone, and you probably edge that out a little bit. But let's go through some of the things that from your perspective and your years of covering the fair that people really can't miss, like the things that they ought to eat, the things they ought to do, little tricks that can get them through the fair, maybe a little easier or maybe a little more cost effective, anything like that you think people ought to know. Let's talk about that for a little bit.
Well, first off, just to talk about cost. Cost shouldn't be an issue when going to the fair. You can get tickets in advance, at a reasonable price. Military tickets are $4 anytime. You can get your kids' tickets. If you want to get in free Monday, you can get in free all day Monday before 11 o'clock on Friday. You can, there's a $4 after 4 on the Thursday of the fair. So there's plenty of opportunity to go, and it's not expensive. And then when you're at the fair, there's plenty of opportunities to not spend a ton of money. You can drop a lot of money at the fair on rides and food, but you can find the dollar iced tea, or, you could fill out a Farm Bureau coupon and get ice cream under the grandstand. I mean, best deal of the fair there. Or $2 tasting Tuesday on Tuesdays. You can, for $2, you can try a bunch of different things that you would never try for $7 or $8 normally, and take advantage of it. So there's so many things. Or one of my favorites is going through the Metal Arc building. They have those people that have the chips and dip, and you can try the different dips. And then you can buy some dip, which is still reasonable, but there's just so many different opportunities in every building. Every building, and the fair over the years really has tried to create a lot of opportunities for people to make it affordable for people to get in, and I've seen them kind of change that over the years and try new things. But I think your point's well taken, that there are a lot of times that you can get into the fair for either free or very, very little money, and once you're in, you've got the entire day and the entire area to kind of get some value out of that. Well, just Ron Diamond, the hypnotist alone, is worth a $7 ticket. And he's funny. He comes back every year, and he just never gets old. And then you have this year at Gottschalk Park, you have Ninja Experience. So ninjas are in. So go see the ninjas, and you don't have to pay anything for it. Or there's so many Kansas artists that are taking the stages that you can sit and enjoy your Prana Pup and listen to someone local sing or perform, or check dancers, or whatever. It's you don't have to pay a lot of money and go to a grandstand concert. You can enjoy so many things at the fair, because the fair is more than the concerts, and it's more than one part of anything. It's everything together makes the Kansas State Fair. It's kind of, I think we've talked about this before too. It's really like Kansas condensed, right? Yeah.
Because you have all these different cultural entertainers from different parts of the state. You have the livestock exhibits and the contest, the domestic arts competitions. So it's like every part of Kansas is just kind of condensed for 10 days at this one place, and you can experience maybe places you'd never get to go otherwise, but you can see them here in this one location. That's right. The giant pumpkin grown by a Kansas resident, whether it's in Liberal or Newton or wherever, at 500, 600 pounds, you can see that in the Pride of Kansas building. You can see a beautiful butter sculpture at the Pride of Kansas building. There's, local communities have booths in there. There's AgriLand, where you can learn about agriculture, and there's a education center now that you can learn about our state, agriculture history. And so there's so much, there's learning opportunities, but then there's so much Kansas opportunities, like you said, that you would never experience otherwise. And it's fun too. Of course. Now, you talked a little bit about, Prano Pups, and that's probably the most iconic food at the fair. But let's go through some foods that you always enjoyed eating at the fair. Every year, one of the things we would do is run through a list of the new foods that were coming, because a lot of these vendors come up with just crazy ideas, usually fried. But they come up with some new idea every year, and they actually put a lot of energy and creativity into coming up with unusual foods. So tell me some of the things that you discovered over the years that you, even if you didn't like them, just that you thought they were so unusual that people might want to try them.
Well, of course, there's the Krispy Kreme hamburger, which I think is completely disgusting. But some people like it.
Well, let's talk about the Krispy Kreme burger.
Yeah.
It is basically a hamburger with Krispy Kreme donuts for hamburger buns, right?
That's right.
And so it's this...
With tomato and pickle and lettuce and mayo. Should not go together.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it should to me either. But people buy it
Yeah.
and like it, and even if for no other reason than it's a unusual thing that you can only get once a year, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
But probably the craziest, and people loved it, I will be honest, they did, but was the Bickel, which I like to say was named after me. And you could find it at Bernard's Cafe, Susie
Okay.
Bernard.
Yep.
It was a Bickel, well, it was a pickle wrapped in bacon.
And they called it a Bickel.
They called it the Bickel. And of course, I was like, why did they name like such a, I love pickles so much. Why would they name this after me? But I actually hate pickles. But
Yeah, I was going to say, the truth is, Amy Bickel hates pickles. She two things, snakes and pickles,
that's right.
doesn't like.
So anyway, I had to find out how they made the Bickel. So that was one of my assignments during one of the fairs when they introduced the Bickel. Was I went behind the scenes and helped make Bickels, and it was a interesting experience.
So you saw that did they wrap it? Did they fry the
And then they
pickle?
fried it.
Okay.
And then they served it, and yeah.
So what other foods did you find that you liked? And I should mention too, you did a lot of that, right? One of the really fun things that we did when we worked on this together is you and Kathy, and of course anybody that knows Kathy Hanks knows that you can't tell her no at all. If she wants to get in and see what you're doing, she's relentless, and she will explain to you why it's such a good story and why you should want to do it. And by the time she's done with you, you'll be happy to give her that story.
That's right.
But you guys got to do a lot of behind the scenes work and see kind of the inner workings of the fair. So
we did.
Tell me about
that. Even making Pronto Pups, how the process of how they did that, because like you said, that's one of the iconic foods of the state fair. And it's been around at least since the 50s, 60s. There's not really a clear date of when the first Pronto Pup booth popped up, but it's been around for decades. And so that was a fun experience. Hot, but it was a fun experience.
Now, on the Pronto Pup, let's talk about, this is a question that always comes up. What makes a Pronto Pup different than a corn dog?
It's wheat flour. So unlike a corn dog, which is corn, it's made out of wheat flour.
And that's what makes it's different than a traditional corn dog, because it's a very big thing. People will say, I'm going to go get a corn dog, and it's not a corn dog.
It's not a corn dog.
It's a Pronto Pup.
Totally different.
And then how do you eat your Pronto Pup?
Mustard.
With the granny's mustard?
Oh, no. It just has to be yellow.
Just yellow mustard.
Just
okay.
yellow mustard. I like to make a little S-y, squiggly line.
Little squiggly line on it?
Uh-huh.
Yep.
And then, walk around and munch on it.
All right. One of the things I know you always did too is you found ice cream. You talked about that you could do the survey at Farm Bureau, you do the quiz at the Farm Bureau booth, and then you can get a coupon to go to...
the ice cream under the grandstand, which has always been a family tradition of mine, is, we might not have got a bunch of food at the fair because my family always did it cheaply when I was growing up, but we always stopped on our last stop and went to the grandstand, under the grandstand, the Kansas Dairy Bar, and got ice cream. So you can do that cheaply too by filling out the Farm Bureau survey and then taking your ticket, and they'll honor you with a free ice cream cone.
And there are a number of places around the fair that there are opportunities to get some free food like that, right? Turkey Hill did that for a while with their ice cream.
And I don't know if Turkey Hill's back, but usually every day of the fair you can go kind of by the 4-H building toward the northwest side of the fairgrounds, and there'd be a big cow, and they'd be handing out little tubs of ice cream that you could take with you and eat. And that was always a popular stop that I made every single day.
Every day.
So, there was a stop there. And then some years it'd be like a 5-hour energy, free 5-hour energy. And I would drink one of those twice a day too.
I remember the year that they were giving away 5-hour energies, and you and Kathy were not well.
Every day.
Every day you can come buzzing into the office saying, we only drank 4 or 5-hour energies today, so I have like 8 hours of energy left. It was so funny.
7 a.m. You always need, good pick-me-up.
Now, any new foods this year that you've seen that are interesting or peculiar?
So I did have one vendor reach out, and their new food this year, which, as I said, I don't like pickles, it's pickle lemonade. So the Carousel Cafe vendor is going to be offering that. That's their new food this year, and they say it's popular. So we'll see how that goes. But
do you know how is it like a frozen lemonade with a pickle in it?
I'm not entirely sure. I thought it was more like lemonade with pickle.
Maybe pickle juice?
Pickle juice.
Interesting.
So
that's at Carousel Cafe?
Yeah, or the vendor that has Carousel Cafe. It might be at our lemonade stand
Okay.
next door. But
anyway, if you want to combine some odd flavors and see what they taste like deep fried together, there's no better place to do that than the Kansas State Fair.
That's right. Lots of choices. Oh, and cheese curds. That's my first thing I'll go get, because you can't find cheese curds like that anywhere else.
No, that's the thing. So talking about that reminds me that there are, one of the things I think always comes out or always came out in your reporting about the fair, and that I know from my own experience, is that this kind of long-standing traditions of the fair. And you mentioned the cheese curds, and that reminds me that my family always, we spent at least one day just eating all the foods that we wanted to eat at the fair. My onion blossom, cheese curds, Pronto Pups, ice cream, roasted corn. Like, we kind of had this circuit that we made. Those are foods that we're not eating any other time of the year, but during the fair we'd do that. The old mill, always take the kids. Now I take my grandkids on that. And there are people older than us who talk about, when they were young and they did that, then they took their kids, then they took their grandkids and maybe their great grandkids. So talk about both like kind of some traditions you have with your family and maybe some of the traditions that stood out to you when you wrote a lot about the fair.
Well, I grew up going to the fair, so that tradition was instilled on me that, every year we'd spend the Sunday at the fair and get ice cream under the grandstand. And then I was in 4-H and was showing rabbits, and I even took a cake one year, which I can't cook. But I think the cake might have got a purple. I don't know. But it got a pretty good ribbon, which was surprising because, like I said, I can't cook. So lots of family traditions there. It just always was when the fair rolled around, when I was older, my friends we want to go to the fair, and we'd pick a date that there was a country music singer that we could go to, and all go to the fair together. So when I moved to Hutchinson, that became another tradition as well. And I introduced my family to the fair. And so our big tradition is, of course, we have to have a Pronto Pup. We have to have cheese curds. We have to ride the Yale Mill and the giant slide. And they always want to see what the butter sculpture is going to be, and the giant pumpkin. And, one thing we like is to ride the train, and then there's somebody that throws free popcorn at you at the kettle corn stand. So there's these little secrets that we just love to experience, and those are just a few of them.
One of the things that always, I guess, has stood out in my mind is, and you kind of hit on it, that you make different memories at different points in your life, right? Like, there are memories I have when I was a young child. Then there are memories that I have and traditions I built as a teenager. And then there are new traditions that were built where I'm trying to create kind of the same memories for my children that I had when I was that age. They then, of course, go on and make their own teenage memories. And then they have kids, and then it's another cycle of that where, grandchildren are then making the same memories, and it just carries. So there's something really, to me, really special about that there's this continuity of tradition that keeps going as the fair goes on and as time goes on and we all get older.
And I think that's why people are such fair fans, because they had those special memories growing up, and then they want to instill that into their own children, and then that that cycle continues, the love of the Kansas State Fair. And I, just some of the people I've talked to, I've talked to people that got married at the fair, or there was one couple that got married in the 1940s, didn't tell their parents. They were probably 18, and then went home and then came back and met at the fair. So it's just, just crazy little, stories of traditions that, and then they would come back every year to celebrate, but I think it's different for everybody.
I think that's true. That's one thing about it. It's kind of we each get to build our individual experiences, but within the community of people who go to the fair, it's also kind of a shared experience.
Yes, because, you still have those same traditions that everybody wants to do, like the yield mill, or the Pronto Pup, but then there's these other experiences that, it might be meeting at the Capper building for a drink, or sitting at Lake Talbot and watching a concert. So, it's so many different memories for everybody.
Is my memory right that there was a baby born at the fair?
I think in the parking lot.
In the parking lot.
I think that's correct.
Yeah.
Did it make it to the hospital? I don't think she did. I think she was born in the parking lot.
As I remember it, I'd have to go back and look at the story, but I seem to remember that we covered that one year, that there was a baby that was born in the parking lot, and I think maybe she was in labor, and then the traffic was thick enough around the fairgrounds that they couldn't think that they could get to the hospital in time.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember that was, I think Kathy covered that one, but it was
probably. So what about, I know over the years too, you wrote about some tricks, like you can bring a wagon into the fair, right?
That's right.
And you can haul your kids around. You can bring some, like a picnic lunch if you want, things like that. Talk about that, because there are things I think people don't really realize they can do.
So you can bring your own wagon. You can bring your own cooler. Of course, no alcoholic beverages, but there's no reason to spend $5 on a bottle of water when you can bring your own in. And there's places to refill as well, including under the grandstand. You don't have to come empty-handed. You can pack and prepare, and that's kind of what makes the fair affordable. And that's what we always did growing up. We'd pack and prepare and have our own water, and then splurge on the ice cream. And so it doesn't have to be $100 day at the fair. It can be as affordable as you want it to be.
Yeah, and I've seen that before, where sometimes there'll be families picnicking around Lake Talbot. There's some shade trees over there, and it's by the water, and you can take a break. If you go and want to make the fair an all-day deal, you can bring those things and set up under a shade tree somewhere, or over by Lake Talbot or wherever, and take a break, let the kids relax for a little bit and get tired walking around and all that, and just take a break, and then go back out and do it again, later in the afternoon or the evening.
Yeah, and there's plenty of places to cool down, Cottonwood Court's air conditioned, Metal Arc Building's air conditioned, and there's just, there's places to take breaks, like you said, or trees to sit under, or, or watch. You can sit at People's Bank and Trust Arena. I have to say that right. It's not Farm Bureau anymore. And watch a concert in the shade, and, take a break. So there's plenty of places to relax and continue your day then. Now,
you mentioned earlier Ron Diamond, and that reminded me a little bit of some of the odd and interesting history of the state fair. And the Ron Diamond issue is funny. The legislature had to, I can't remember the year, but it was...
I want to say it was around like 2009, 8, yeah.
I feel like that's right, but it was ridiculously recent that we had to change the law to allow hypnotists, because...
It was against the law.
It was against the law to have a hypnotist anywhere in the state.
That's correct. And so, Denny Steckline went to the legislature, and they wanted to bring Ron Diamond in specifically, and they got the law changed. And
because he was a popular act everywhere that he went, and he's a popular act here.
Yeah, he's always packed.
He fills that stadium he's at the People's Bank and Trust Arena, and he fills it every time he has a show.
Oh, he does. And it's always, his show, he always has the same premise, but it's always funny. Just watching the people. I tried to do it
once. I remember you went up and tried to get hypnotized.
I did.
You couldn't get hypnotized.
He gave directions and I wasn't paying that much attention. And it was like, put your hands at your side, and I had them on my lap. And then it was like, close your eyes. And I was looking to see if people were watching me. So I immediately got the little tap on the shoulder to leave the stage. But, but I've known Ron for a lot of years, and he's just a great person anyway. And he's just a funny, great showman. So. But yeah, that was one law that we had to change. There's been others too. I mean,
we've tried to change.
I think grapes. We couldn't have wine.
Oh, that's right. That's right. It was only 3-2 beer allowed on the fair for a long, long time. We couldn't do craft beer. Couldn't do anything other than that.
Yeah.
And so there had to be a change in the law to allow wine. And now we have 2 beer gardens, and they serve wine.
They do, and they showcase Kansas wines.
Yeah.
So that's, Kansas wines and Kansas beers, and from Free State, Salt City Brewery, and so that's neat too. That you can, if you're into craft beer, you can discover some that you might not get to otherwise.
Yeah. So otherwise, the history of the fair and the history of it coming to Hutchinson is a pretty interesting story, and I know some of it, but I'll just set it up a little bit and then let you take, because you know this history a lot better than I do, but. There was a conflict about whether the state fair was going to be in Hutchinson or whether it would be in Topeka, and that fight ensued for a number of years. And tell everyone about that.
So there basically was 2 state fairs going on at the same time. Topeka had a state fair, and Hutchinson had a state fair, but neither one was the official Kansas State Fair. So what basically happened is Hutchinson decided they wanted the right to the official Kansas State Fair. Senator Emerson Carey, was senator here at the time, and he led the effort. He got a lot of the rural vote, and they passed for Hutchinson to have the Kansas State Fair, and the Topeka Fair lasted for a few more decades after that, and then basically fizzled out. But it was still going into the 30s, I know.
And at the time that was settled, if I remember some of the headlines I've read correctly, Topeka reported that it was stolen. The fair was stolen from them by rural lawmakers and Western lawmakers who decided that they wanted to have the fair out here instead of all the way in Topeka.
That's right, because my understanding is this was before redistricting. Is that correct? And interestingly, the Hutch newsletter effort, was it in the 60s?
In the 60s.
Yeah, for to redistrict the state fairly.
Around one man, one vote.
Oh, okay, is that what it was?
Yeah.
Okay, so you know that part better.
The redistricting, or the districts used to be drawn along, if I remember, geography, and not just around proportional representation of one person per vote. Some of this history is I'm a little shady, but I know that Western Kansas used to have a lot more political power than it does today, and part of that was because of the way we handled drawing the districts before the 1960s, when the News won a Pulitzer for that work.
So it would be interesting if if things were different back in 1912 when they were voting on this, if they didn't have that rural, Western Kansas political powerhouse, that whether would Hutchinson have the Kansas State Fair? I don't know.
So what other? There's interesting story around Ye Old Mill too.
That's right. It is I believe it's the oldest building on the fairgrounds. It was built in 1915. There's only 2 of them like it. One's in Minnesota State Fair and one's at Kansas State Fair. There was a family that built it, and they still run it. And the same family still runs it at Minnesota. But it was once built as a tunnel of love, and then about I think the 50s. Maybe a little earlier, it changed to kind of a scary, dark ride where, people jump out, and today there's like props that are kind of funny, but, supposed to be scary. And, it's just a whole experience of going through it, and there's noises, and it's creepy, and it's old, and it
feels it too.
Yeah.
It feels old and creepy.
That's what's great. It has that water wheel, and that is a tradition that I have to go on every year.
Yes. My family as well. We go on that every year. And, talking about traditions, that's the thing. When my daughter was young, we'd take her on it, and it's a rite of passage when the kids say, well, that didn't scare me.
Yeah.
And then that's happened this time around with Lila, my granddaughter. She's gone through it, and she was very proud when she said, well, that wasn't scary at all. So there's a point on the old mill where every little kid says, that wasn't scary to me anymore. So I'm big now.
Which I learned from my daughters. They would shut their eyes when I would take them on there. They'd shut them and, they'd peek out and be, like, this is really scary. But, now Jordy might still shut her eyes. I don't know. I'll have to see.
Probably
I'm usually
so.
like, Jordy, open your eyes. There was a time where, it got into a disrepair that they talked about tearing it down, but it's just so many people have a love for it that they fought to keep it, and the Hutchinson Correctional Facility worked to restore it, and it's in great shape today. So
But that was a time where, the community really rallied around that
did.
building, right?
Because there were stories in the Hutch News that, we can't afford to keep this up, and they were going to tear it down. And that's when the warden at the time stepped in. I think he had a real love of the fair, and they led an effort to restore it, and restore it at a reasonable price. And the tradition continues thanks to that effort.
Yeah, and usually when you go by that, there's usually a good line of people looking to get in there. It's a very, it's probably the most recognizable building on the fair, and probably one of the most popular.
It's fun. Even in the old pictures, you can pick it out because it's kind of that, backwards 8S, from the aerial pictures that you can see. It's just very distinct. And one of my behind the scenes at the news was I wanted to be a scarer. So I talked Charlie Griffin into letting me scare people. It was fun. I got to hold like some kind of noisemaker and scare them at the end of the ride. And
did you yell at them like, "Bah!" Because they do that a lot, right? When you're coming around a bend.
And you jump out, yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, Kathy and I we did it together, and she decided she just wanted to take tickets. No fun, but
she didn't want to be in the back scaring people.
She didn't want to be in the back.
That sounds interesting. Well, what else should people know about the fair, especially coming into this year? We had to miss it last year because of COVID. We're coming back this year. What else should people know going into this year's fair?
I guess just to hit the high points, you can do it affordably. There's days you can go that, whether it's Friday morning or Monday or 4 after 4 on Thursday, the days you can go that's affordable. On my annual bucket list at the fair is, you have to make a stop at the giant pumpkin in the Pride of Kansas building. You have to see what the butter sculpture is. I liked the cookie jar, the governor's cookie jar. I always have to see that and see what design somebody came up with and who the winning entry is. I like to see the winning quilt. I'm not a quilter, but I just think the craftsmanship on that is amazing. I like to walk the carnival just because it's interesting. You see interesting people at the fair. That's one of the things that people watching is a lot of fun.
And it's free.
That's right. It doesn't cost you anything. You can sit on a bench and see who walks by. So, those are just some things that I enjoy, and I like to go into every building, and, there's people that have been there for just decades that, the Ginsu knife guy, I don't know what fair number this is, but it's at least over 30. There's under the grandstand, there's that Kansas Women's Temperance Union booth with a little creepy doll that rings a bell, and they've been at the fair since 1913.
Beer goggles.
Oh yeah,
They
I've
have
done
beer
that.
goggles, yes.
Yeah, so you can try to walk a straight line, and it's impossible with their goggles. But they are the oldest vendor at the Kansas State Fair, and I believe Our Lady of Guadalupe Church is the oldest food vendor, or one of the oldest food vendors. So, there's just so much to see and do. And I know people that, I would go there every day and to cover different things. And I know people that get a season pass and go there every day. So it's just, it's a celebration of all things Kansas. And I really think the focus of the fair in recent years has been to really celebrate that, to, kind of like you said, there's parts of every part of the state that come together at the Kansas State Fair, and it's something we should really be proud of. It's the best of Kansas.
All in one place.
All in one place. And if you love Kansas, I mean, why not go?
That's right. Well, thanks for coming on today and sharing some of your stories and memories and walking in the past a little bit with me from our fun times working together.
Hey, I enjoyed it. I will be at the fair on Friday, and the fair is September 10th through the 19th.
All right. Thank you. Guys, go out and make your own memories with your families at the fair and have a lot of fun. Take care. Thanks for listening to That Podcast in Hutch. I'd like to thank a few people here at the end of the show. First, I'd like to thank Jenny Burgett for doing the cover art for That Guy in Hutch, and my son Mitchell Probst for creating and recording some music for me. And also Chris Acker at Salt City Sound and I want to thank all of them for their help in making this idea of a local podcast a reality. This is all made possible through a collaboration between Salt City Sound and the Heartland Arts and Culture Collective. These groups are working to build the resources and infrastructure to support the arts, music, and storytelling in our community. If you're interested in creating your own content or sponsoring local podcasts, contact Salt City Sound. And also, none of this would be possible without listeners and supporters. And if you'd like to support this content and help us be able to keep this going, consider subscribing to my newsletter, which is thatguyinhutch.substack.com. And we'll put all of this information in the story notes so that you can have it at the ready and you know how to contact us and how to support this local effort that we're undertaking. Thanks again for listening.
A Salt City Sound production.